There's a specific phrase that acts like kind of a perfect litmus test for empathy.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, if you say it, you probably don't suffer from the condition we are diving into today. But if you hear it and you're one of the millions of people who do suffer from this, it probably makes you want to scream. Or honestly, just give up.
Right. It's the classic, I just have a really bad headache line, isn't it?
That's the one. It is the ultimate dismissal. It's calling in sick to work and having someone say, oh, bummer, just take an ibuprofen and power through.
Which is completely reductive. I mean, it's like looking at a Category 5 hurricane and saying, well, it's just a little bit of rain. The scale is wrong, the mechanism is wrong, and frankly, the treatment is just totally wrong.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive today. We are going to unpack a stack of research, specifically focusing on the work of Dr. Corina Ianculovici at the Mirelle Institute, and we're going to validate why that phrase is so incredibly wrong.
It's a really fascinating set of sources because it introduces this root cause approach. It reframes chronic migraine not as a pain event, but as a systemic failure, a neurobiological disorder.
Yeah, we're going to look at why standard painkillers just fail. And we are going to explore a concept from the text that honestly blew my mind, which is this idea of the starving brain.
Oh, the energy crisis aspect.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the key insight here. Your brain isn't just hurting, it is literally running out of fuel.
I really want to get to that starvation part because it sounds intense. But first, we have to define the beast because people misuse the word migraine all the time for any bad headache. But clinically, looking at the Mirelle Institute's data, the definition of chronic migraine is terrifyingly specific.
It's a massive burden.
Yeah.
To actually be diagnosed with chronic migraine, you are looking at 15 or more headache days per month.
Wait, stop there for a second. 15 days, that is half a month?
Yep, 6 months out of every year.
That is just...
And out of those 15 days, at least 8 of them must have specific migraine features. Plus, the attacks have to last 4 hours or longer. So you aren't just losing half your life to pain, you're losing it to a systemic shutdown.
You mentioned systemic, and the text describes this as a neuroinflammatory storm. I love that imagery, but let's ground it. What is physically happening in the brain during this storm? Is it blood vessels bursting, muscles cramping? Because that's the usual story, right? That it's vascular.
Right, the vascular theory. But that is the old way of thinking. The modern understanding, which Dr. Ianculovici emphasizes, is that it's electricity and chemistry gone wrong. It's a neurobiological disorder. She breaks this storm down into 3 pillars.
Okay, lay one on me. Pillar 1.
Pillar 1 is trigeminal nerve hyperexcitability.
The trigeminal nerve, that's the big one in the face and head area, right?
Exactly. It's the primary sensory highway for the face.
Right.
Now imagine a high-tech security system in a bank. Normally, it only goes off if someone actually smashes the vault door. But in a migraine brain, that system gets locked in the on position, the wind blows outside, alarm, a shadow moves, alarm. The nerve is firing pain signals even when there is no actual damage or threat.
So the nerve itself is physically intact, but the software is glitching.
Precisely. The threshold for firing has dropped through the floor. And that constant ringing of the alarm leads directly to the second pillar, which is mitochondrial dysfunction.
Okay, mitochondria. High school biology flashback. The powerhouse of the cell.
The powerhouse, yes. But think about the context here. Neurons, your brain cells, are incredibly expensive to run. They need massive amounts of energy to reset that alarm system we just talked about.
Because every time a nerve fires, it costs energy to reload it.
Exactly. But if the mitochondria can't keep up, the cell becomes unstable. It lacks the energy to maintain electrical stability, so it literally can't reset.
So the alarm is ringing, the battery is draining, and the system can't reset itself because it's completely out of juice.
Which leads us right to the third pillar. Central sensitization. This is the result of the first 2. The brainstem, which receives all these signals, eventually just says, okay, I guess everything is a threat now.
The source material used an analogy here about a threshold, but I've always thought of it kind of like a broken thermostat.
That's a great way to look at it.
Like if your thermostat breaks, it might read 100 degrees when it's actually 70 in the room. So the AC starts blasting, freezing everyone out. The input is wrong, so the reaction is extreme.
Exactly. In the brain, this amplification manifests as something called allodynia. This lowers your pain threshold so much that you become completely intolerant to normal inputs.
This is why light hurts for migraine sufferers. Photophobia.
Right. Light shouldn't hurt, it's just photons. But if your central processor is sensitized, a desk lamp feels like a spotlight burning your retinas. Sound becomes unbearable, even smells. That is central sensitization. The filter's is just gone.
Okay, so we have a brain that is hyperexcitable, low on energy, and has lost its ability to filter inputs. That is a total recipe for disaster. So let's look at the solution provided in the texts, the Mirelle strategy. It's a two-part approach, and part one is about calming the storm immediately.
Yes, and this brings us to precision neuromodulation.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. I'm looking at the notes, and I see the brand names, Botox, Dysport, Xeomine. My immediate thought is, wait, aren't those for wrinkles? Are we just freezing the forehead so we don't look stressed while we're in agony?
That is the most common reaction. It
Yes.
sounds like a cosmetic upsell. But in this context, we are not worried about vanity at all. If you go to a neurologist for this, they aren't looking at your frown lines. They're looking for nerve terminals.
So how does a wrinkle relaxer stop a neurological storm? Does it just paralyze the muscle so it doesn't squeeze the nerve?
No, and that's a massive misconception. It is not about the muscle. It's about the chemistry inside the nerve. These injectables are actually neurochemical inhibitors.
Okay, break that down for me.
To put it simply, nerves talk to each other by throwing bags of chemicals across a tiny gap. To throw those bags, the nerve needs a mechanism, like a little launcher or a docking station. And that docking mechanism relies on something called snare proteins.
Snare proteins. Sounds like a trap.
In a way, they are. They trap the chemical bag and fuse it to the cell wall so it can burst open and send the signal. What these drugs do is they essentially target the nerve terminals and block those snare proteins. They break the zipper.
So the bag of chemicals is there, the nerve wants to send the pain signal.
But it can't open the door. The launcher is broken. So the nerve wants to scream, but it cannot release the inflammatory neurotransmitters to deliver the message.
It essentially mutes the mic.
It absolutely mutes the mic.
Yeah.
Specifically, it stops the release of CGRP, which is calcitonin gene-related peptide. That's a major player in inflammation. And it also stops glutamate and substance P.
Okay, so if we mute the mic on the outside, on the peripheral nerves in the face and head, does that fix the brainstem issue? That broken thermostat we talked about earlier?
This is a really critical distinction found in the source material. The difference between peripheral and central sensitization. The shots go into the periphery, the overactive nerve endings on the outside. By silencing them, you prevent that electrical storm from reaching the brainstem.
You give the brainstem a much-needed vacation.
Exactly. If the brainstem stops getting screamed at, it can naturally start to recalibrate. It realizes the threat is gone, and it turns the sensitivity back down. But, and this is a huge but, the source is very clear. This is not a permanent cure.
Because the nerves eventually heal.
The snare proteins regenerate. The launcher gets rebuilt over time. That's why the schedule is so strict. The treatment needs to be repeated every 12 weeks to maintain that stability. You have to reapply the mute button before the screaming starts again.
Right. So that is part one. We've muted the noise. But the notes say explicitly that neuromodulators are not a standalone cure. And this is where we pivot to the second half of the strategy, which is honestly the most actionable part of this deep dive.
Yes, because you can mute the noise, but if the system is still weak, if those batteries are still dead, it's just going to crash again the moment the drugs wear off. This brings us to part two, metabolic and mitochondrial optimization.
This is the starving brain theory. I want to dig into this because it completely changes how we view the condition. We usually think of pain as an addition, something bad added to our day. But this suggests the pain is actually a subtraction, a lack of energy.
It is a profound shift in thinking. Migraine is, in part, a disorder of impaired brain energy metabolism. The brain is an absolute energy hog. It takes up about 2% of your body weight, but consumes 20% of your glucose and oxygen.
So it's a high-performance engine.
Exactly. And if that engine's power plants, the mitochondria, are dysfunctional, the neurons become completely unstable. If it doesn't get premium fuel, it sputters.
But help me understand the starving part. If I eat a giant meal, let's say I eat a massive stack of pancakes, my blood sugar is high, I have plenty of fuel, why would my brain be starving?
That's the paradox. It's not just about having fuel. It's about processing it with stability. The source lists a few specific metabolic factors Dr. Ianculovici evaluates, and the first big one is insulin sensitivity.
Which I usually associate with diabetes or maybe weight gain, not head pain.
Well, think about what insulin does. It manages blood sugar. The brain relies entirely on glucose for fuel, but it needs a steady stream. If you have high insulin resistance or you eat that giant stack of pancakes, you get a massive spike in blood glucose, followed by a massive crash.
Ah, the classic sugar crash. We've all felt that mid-afternoon nap coming on.
Right, but in a migraine brain, that crash is incredibly dangerous. The source explains that a sudden drop in glucose availability can trigger something called cortical spreading depression.
That sounds incredibly bleak. Cortical spreading depression, what is that visually?
It's a technical term, but imagine a rolling blackout. It is a slow wave of electrical silence that moves across the surface of the brain. The lights literally go out in those neurons because they don't have the fuel to maintain their electrical charge.
And that blackout is the migraine.
That blackout is the electrical wave that often causes the aura, those visual disturbances people get, and it triggers the severe pain phase that follows. So eating that huge spike of sugar and
It
crashing...
could literally power down your brain and trigger a storm.
Exactly. So stable blood sugar isn't just a general health tip. For a migraine sufferer, it is a neurological safety rail. You simply cannot afford the brownouts.
That is wild. Okay, so we need stable sugar. But the notes also talk about nutrient repletion. And I see the usual suspects here. Magnesium and riboflavin, which is vitamin B2.
Yes, specifically to support mitochondrial function.
I feel like everyone tells migraine sufferers to take magnesium. Is there a real hard science reason for that in the text, or is it just a wellness trend?
Oh, it's very real science. Magnesium is essentially the gatekeeper for the NMDA receptor in the brain. Without getting too bogged down in the biochemistry, think of magnesium as the cooling rod in a nuclear reactor.
Okay, I like that visual.
If you don't have enough magnesium, the reactor gets too hot. The neurons fire way too easily. They become trigger happy. Magnesium keeps them calm until there is an actual legitimate signal to fire.
And the text also briefly touches on gut health here too, right?
Yes, it mentions gut-driven immune activation as a contributor. If your gut is inflamed, it sends systemic inflammatory signals that further stress the brain's energy reserves. Everything is connected.
So we need stable sugar to prevent blackouts, cooling rods to prevent overheating, and a calm gut. But then there's this other element mentioned in the Mirelle notes, and this one felt totally new to me, NAD plus BIC?
Yes, NAD plus BIC, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
Quite a mouthful.
It is, but it's arguably the most important molecule you might not know about. NAD plus is a coenzyme required for ATP production, and ATP is cellular energy. It's also vital for cellular repair.
So it's the currency.
It is the currency. You cannot run the factory without it. But here's the major problem. NAD plus naturally declines. As we age, it drops. Stress eats it up. Systemic inflammation depletes it.
So our neuronal energy reserves are constantly dwindling, especially if we are stressed out or dealing with chronic pain.
Correct. And when NAD plus declines, your neurons lose their ability to generate energy. They become prone to hyperexcitability.
Now, here is the part I struggled with a bit when reading the source. If my neurons are completely out of energy, why are they hyperactive? Why aren't they just tired? Why is it an electrical storm and not just a nap?
That is the million-dollar question. And the best analogy to understand this is the tired toddler.
Oh, I know this one well.
So a toddler is exhausted, completely out of energy, way past their bedtime. Do they sit down and quietly read a book?
Absolutely not. They scream, they run in circles, they throw things. It's a total meltdown.
Exactly. Because it takes energy to regulate emotions.
Yeah.
It takes biological energy to stay calm and inhibited. The brain is the exact same way. It takes energy to inhibit a signal, to say no to a stimulus. When the brain is starving and low on NAD plus SWASH, it loses the energy to inhibit. It loses the ability to say shh, so it screams.
That makes almost too much sense. A migraine is essentially a neuronal tantrum because the brain is overtired and underfed.
Which is exactly why the Mirelle strategy includes NAD plus therapy. By raising NAD plus levels, you are refilling the tank. You are giving the brain the currency it needs to pay for calm.
The source calls this raising the migraine threshold.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is how the two distinct parts of the strategy lock together. This is the synthesis of the whole systems-based approach.
So let's connect the dots for the listener because we have covered a lot of biology today. We have the neuromodulators on one side and the metabolic optimization on the other. How do they actually work in tandem?
Think of it this way. The neuromodulators, the injectables, they calm the pathway. They reduce the incoming noise immediately. They act as a fire break to buy you peace.
They stop the toddler from screaming right now.
Right. But the metabolic optimization, the stable insulin, the NAD plus the magnesium that raises the threshold, it increases your resilience. It's the nap and the healthy snack that builds a stronger system so the toddler doesn't throw a tantrum tomorrow.
So doing both leads to a real reduction in attack frequency and severity. You aren't just masking symptoms anymore, you're achieving what the text calls neurological recalibration.
Exactly. And this really highlights Dr. Ianculovici's critique of traditional medications. If you look at standard oral preventatives, like beta blockers or anti-seizure meds, what are they actually doing?
They're just trying to suppress the symptom, putting a heavy lid on a boiling pot.
Right. Do they address mitochondrial dysfunction? No. Do they fix insulin resistance or hormonal instability? No. So you might dampen the system a bit, but the underlying engine is still starving and unstable.
You are putting a mute button on a starving brain, but you aren't feeding it. And eventually, a starving brain will find a way to scream no matter how much traditional medication you throw at it.
Precisely. It's why so many patients fail those standard treatments. They aren't treating the root cause.
This has been a massive shift in perspective. It really moves the journey from viewing migraines as just bad headaches to seeing them as this complex interplay of electrical storms and energy deficits.
And it empowers you. Because while the Mirelle Institute is a specific clinic in New Jersey, the biological principles we discussed are universal for all migraine sufferers. You might not be able to control the weather or your genetics, but managing inflammation, keeping insulin stable, and supporting mitochondrial health, those are actionable things.
It brings up a broader point, too. Even if you don't have chronic migraines, this concept of the body's check engine light feels incredibly relevant.
Oh, absolutely. The underlying biology of energy deficit isn't unique to migraineurs. They just feel the failure much more acutely.
Right. It leaves you with this provocative thought to mull over. If a migraine is actually a sign of a starving brain or a systemic energy failure, what other signals from our bodies are we completely ignoring by just trying to numb the pain instead of fueling the system?
We constantly try to override the signal. We drink more caffeine, we push harder. But maybe we need to ask why the tank is empty in the first place.
This exactly. Listen to the signal before the system forces a shutdown. Well, that is it for this deep dive into the Mirelle Institute's root cause approach. Hopefully your brain feels a little more fueled than when we started. We will catch you next time.